Live.
Okay, I think we're live. Cool. So, yes, for those of you watching, this is Android Office Hours. I guess actually no. Are we actually live now? Yes, we are live. Good. Making sure. So yeah. So for those of you who are joining us for the first time this week, this is your chance to go and ask members of the Android team any questions you might have, technical questions about the Android framework or related topics. So if you haven't seen it yet, there is a moderator queue where you can go ahead and ask us questions and vote on questions other people have already asked. And we'll be just going down this list. I believe certain people who have been invited by radio, which I think is everyone he's following, which is a lot of people.
My entire extended circles.
Everyone he's following, everyone who's following them, can also join in and ask us questions live. So you're certainly welcome to do that as well. Though for the most part, we'll be going along the order in the moderator queue. So let's go ahead and get started with the first question here. So, large image pan zoom. Is there a standard or recommended implementation of a view that allows to zoom, either like pinch or double tap, and pan similar to the gallery app that's built into the system? So that's a very good question. So the easiest implementation that comes to mind would be just to use a Webview. If you're just trying to do a simple image, that functionality is already built in there, so you just load the Webview, or you load your image as a web page and let the Webview take care of it for you. As far as that, though, I don't think we have anything built into the system that lets you just say, I want to be able to pinch and zoom and get the normal behavior. You have to actually define those actions yourself and basically tell the system what you want the different gestures to do. There are a number of examples online. Before this, I just did a search Android pinch to zoom image view, and the first 3 hits are all Stack Overflow answers that have some sample code to do this. So you could certainly copy what's there, or alternatively, just take a look at the code for Webview. Android's all open source, so you can just take a look and see how Webview implements the same behavior and just copy it into your app. Do you have any other thoughts, Alex?
You mentioned earlier map view might be a possibility?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, so you could also load custom images into a map view, and use that to go and display them as well. So map view does have ways to go and basically set your own tiles and define a custom map, which doesn't necessarily actually have to be a map. So you could take advantage of that. All right. So next question here. Off topic. Will there be a mobile version for Google Moderator? And the answer is yes, because it already exists. It's just not an Android market. So if you do a Google search for Android Moderator, I believe is what I searched for, there's a project on Google Project Hosting that'll let you install that. You paste in the URL for whatever moderator queue you want to go and post to, and it'll load it up there.
The question specifically asks if it's an official version, or if there's an official version. This version on Google Code is written by a Googler. I don't think it's the quote-unquote official Android market.
Right.
Or Android market client.
It's close enough, right?
Right. It's pretty close. There's also one just called Moderator somewhere on Android market. I haven't tried, but it's definitely worth a look.
Okay. So next question then. Honeycomb, is there a way to go and use the functionality provided by a remote view service on pre-Honeycomb devices, I believe is the question. So for those not familiar, remote views are a way to go and basically create widgets and notification items. Prior to Honeycomb, you actually can't interact with remote views. Honeycomb added that functionality, so prior to that, if you tapped on a remote view, the best you could, you could tap on it and it could, surface new activity, or you could have buttons that would toggle, but dragging wasn't actually something you could do until Honeycomb. So prior to that, there's actually not really a good way to display a list view as a remote view. So because of that, I actually don't have any really good advice here. I don't know how you'd actually, remote view service aside, I don't know how you'd actually implement that as a remote view. So
Is the question specifically asking about remote views pre-Honeycomb?
Well, it's for remote view service.
Okay,
so
yeah.
I'd imagine so.
The second half sounds like they're just asking about the best way to populate a list view in general.
Yeah, I mean, if we're missing something, definitely, feel free to hop on the on air here and give us some clarification. But I mean, if you're just working with a normal list view and you want to populate it normally, there are of course ways to do that don't require remote view service. In fact, I wouldn't normally do that as the preferred method to populate a list view normally. So usually the best way, as of Honeycomb, is to use a loader.
Loaders.
Yes. Loaders were not available before Honeycomb. There were, of course, other ways to do that. But loaders make life very easy. They go and offload the task of loading your data off the UI thread and then pushing it into your list view in a way that makes sure you don't degrade performance of your app. We do provide a backwards compatible implementation of loaders as part of the Android support package. So for those of you who don't know, support package is a download in the SDK manager, which provides support for mostly fragments and loaders on older phones. So that way you can use those classes even if they're not part of the system. So that's probably the best way to do that right now. All right.
Let's take a question from Chris, who's online. I know that you asked the question in the stream earlier, so why don't you share it with us all?
Yeah, I was just trying to basically get a quick contact window to show my own app icon. I was wondering what's required as far as, like, do I need an account? Do I need a sync adapter? What do I need to do that? I couldn't easily find any documentation on what's needed to add that to the quick contact window of the Contacts app.
Oh, so you want to add a new icon inside of the quick contacts window?
Yes.
That's a good
Like
question.
Skype does.
Interesting.
Yeah, I've never actually added one. I know there is an API. There is a way to do it.
Yeah, I've modified my own quick contacts windows within my own app before, but I've never. You're talking about adding your application to, like, whenever someone clicks up, that opens the quick contact window in, like, the Contacts app or something, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like if I'll have a sync adapter that's going to put some particular data into the contacts table, and with this particular MIME type, I want to know what I need to do to get that MIME type registered and whatever else, so my app icon shows up on a quick contact window after tapping a quick contact badge.
Gotcha.
You need a quick sync adapter.
Sync adapter?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that does sound about right, because you're going to go and provide additional information within the contact, which is normally performed by a sync adapter. I suspect there's probably something a bit more, because you have to specify an icon for it as well, right? Which is still probably...
And a MIME type also.
Right. It's a very good question.
Do you have a link that you can post into the chat window?
Yeah.
Yeah. Does it actually show you how to create it? The page you're looking at there?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, perfect.
Awesome.
Yeah. So we actually have a link here that's a little tutorial on how to do that.
Oh, okay, very cool. Yeah, I found a tutorial for doing it in your own app and modifying your own implementation quick contact badge, but not for regular contacts. So I don't
Right,
know.
exactly.
Yeah, that's definitely the more common use case, right? Most apps want to display a contact and then just display existing actions for it. Though, yeah, like I said, it definitely is possible to go and add additional badges to it, additional actions to that quick contact dialog. So, and this tutorial covers that. So Rado is posting that somewhere. Are you posting that as a comment to the original post?
Yes.
Okay. So if you check the comments for this video, Rado's going to post the link there for you.
All right, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, totally. All right. And actually, we have another person live right now too. Do you have any questions?
Yes, I do. I just put it in the chat window. But anyway, I'll ask it again.
Which actually, I don't think we can actually see on our end.
1 second.
Oh,
Oh.
there we go. Cool. Now we can see the chat window. Awesome.
So, repeating the question. So we have a database that we use through a content provider that's stored on the SD card. And sometimes we notice that the database is mounted in a read-only manner. And we don't know how that gets into that situation. Are you guys aware of any potential issues why it would happen that way?
So on older devices, whenever you connect a device to the computer, the SD card either gets unmounted or placed into read-only mode because the user can copy the files there. I actually thought I got completely unmounted. That
was my understanding.
Yes, that actually probably doesn't explain it there.
Are you seeing this behavior on some devices, or just some of the time on the same device?
Some of the time on the same device. So it
Do you
could.
know if it makes a difference when the app's launched? The other one I'm wondering is, I'm not sure exactly what the behavior here is, but I know when you first start the device up, it's going to have to go and mount that SD card, which requires running FSCK and all that other fun stuff to make sure that the file system's actually in a good state. So I'm wondering if it's possible that there's a window there where the file system's still read-only. And if your app launches too soon, perhaps that could be the problem?
Yeah, we don't know the specific use case of where it's happening, but we're seeing it quite a bit in our logs, so we're trying to figure out what we need to look for.
Yeah, I think the short answer is that if the database fails, if you're using the database helper, if the database fails to open in read-write mode, it will fall back and attempt to give you the database in read-only mode. So what it's really telling you is that the database has had some kind of problem trying to open in write mode. So there are some cases where that will happen. I can't remember them off the top of my head, but they are listed in the content provider docs in the dev guide. So that will sort of tell you the sorts of circumstances. But effectively, it's a fallback mode for if transactional access to the database has failed for whatever reason, and that may be, as the guys say, something either process of mounting or unmounting, or being low on disk space, or really there's a number of reasons why it might happen. If you're not seeing it sort of consistently on one device or one circumstance, then it could be just a number of different things causing it to happen.
Yeah, I know that earlier versions of SQLite had some weird relationships with threading. So actually, I don't know what version of SQLite we use, but it might be worth looking at the SQLite documentation to see just in terms of the multi-threaded stuff, to see what happens. I mean, you could be hitting locks if you're writing with one thread and trying to read with another or something like that.
Okay, we'll look at some more docs and figure out. But sometimes we've noticed that if I reboot the phone, it gets back into a normal state and we can't reproduce it anymore.
Okay, gotcha.
Actually, that's one thing which you should probably keep in mind as well, is that it sounds like you're just opening the database once, and then if it's stuck in read mode for whatever reason, then you can never get access to it. A better approach is to actually get that read, or attempt to get the right access to the database every time you write to it. The content providers will actually cache that, so it's not doing the full opening and creation every time. So rather than doing it once and then keeping that reference, is just ask for it each time. So within your content provider, when you're accessing the SQLite database, basically every time you do a write transaction, get write access to the database. And so then if it does fail once, you don't need to reboot the phone before you're able to get that write access again. You can just basically retry straight away.
Okay, and then it might work, basically, you're saying. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It can be transient, and in fact, in most cases, it will be a transient error. So effectively, just every time you need to do a write transaction, request write access.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, cool. So let's go on to the next question on Moderator here. So what's the best way to keep cookies in sync between Webview and HTTP client or HTTP URL connection? And the asker, Scott here, says he has a custom cookie store for HTTP client that syncs with Webview via Android WebKit Cookie Manager. Is there a better way? Now, I don't think there actually is, honestly.
That's the only way.
Yeah.
That I know. You're saying that's the only way to do it?
That I know of is on.
Yeah.
Yes, it's.
Yeah, so there's three people here who say that's probably the only way to do this. So
Yeah.
that's likely,
better.
Yeah, likely the only option there, that, at least as far as we know. Now, Webview and HTTP client, HTTP URL connection, those are two completely separate things, right? So it's not entirely surprising that you have to go through some extra work to go and sync those up. Yeah, and
Yeah, I don't.
I can't think of anything else that would make it work.
If there is a better way, then it's unknown to at least 3 or 4 Googlers on the Android team. So.
Yeah. Now, if somebody does know a better way, certainly let us know. But
yeah, we would love to know. Actually, if there was a better way, that'd be awesome too.
Yeah. Okay. So we've got a couple more people here for live questions. Let's pick the one that we actually see a picture for.
Right.
I can't read the name there, but
It's just dropped off.
yeah, you.
Obviously. Hey, I actually posted a question on Moderator about the flashlight stuff. If you've seen it. So
That's further down, so not yet.
yep. Okay. So basically, the problem is the camera, and the camera is just messed up on some of the devices. It returns different stuff. Sometimes camera objectives are just null. You get different set parameters, failed errors, and stuff like that. And I don't see how you could implement the camera flash functionality across different devices, besides having a workaround for every one of them.
Yeah. So are you looking do you know which OS?
I'm looking.
Camera APIs have changed quite a bit, since they were first released.
I have statistic here from 2.2 to 4.0.3. And
when we added hooks in there for the flash.
I want to say it was 2 or 2.2.
Yeah. So it should all be there then.
I'm seeing that the different. I don't know. There's a new device, Samsung CB2, which is quite popular right now, that has a flash and has no support for turning it on.
Okay.
So basically what I say is just, get flash modes, get supported flash modes, and it says blah, nothing. Which certainly makes it my problem, since the flashlight is there, but I just can't turn it on.
Right.
This sounds like holes in the CTS.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. So we have a we have a document online called the Android compatibility definition document, and then also CTS, compatibility test suite. And so these are it's what we provide to device manufacturers. That it's a series of rules and the tests to go along with them to make something an Android certified device, basically. And we ask them to go through that and make sure that everything works the same across devices. So most of the time when you see behavior like this, it suggests that we have either underspecified behavior in the definition document, or we're just missing a test and they just overlooked it as well on their end. So it's likely that one of these two things is the reason why you're seeing that. This doesn't help you too much for your immediate case, but what we should go and do from here is update that document to make sure that flash functionality is adequately covered and make sure that device manufacturers are thoroughly testing that. So after this, we'll follow up with the team that maintains that and have them review those sections and update them. So that's probably the best thing we can do here, in the immediate case here for that.
Yeah, I know.
I'm looking at the document right now, and it looks like, at least from what I can tell, enabling Flash via API might be optional, actually. In which case, as long as they document it correctly and they're not, they're not publishing that it's API accessible Flash, then they're within CTS.
Right. So there's a camera parameters object, which does that tell them whether or not they can modify the flash? Let's see here.
Yes, it does. It does.
So on the devices you're talking about, does it indicate that the flash should be so it should be accessible in those cases?
No, it's not accessible. But the problem is if you see the flashlight on your device and you try to use the application, so that kind of makes it my problem then.
Right.
You're getting all the downloads because it doesn't work on my phone and stuff like that. So is there any workaround or anything like that it could be used? I mean, on some devices, it's just manually setting the parameter, right? You can see set param quotes and put in the parameter name, and it works magically. Here, it doesn't. So is there any way to do it besides writing a custom stuff for every freaking phone there is?
Yeah, if it's not supported by the device, we can only do so much to go and convince them that they should. And obviously writing a custom workaround for each phone isn't a very scalable approach there. So maybe what we should be doing is asking the market team to add a feature to go and control the flash. I know there is Alex is on the screen here now. There's Android hardware camera flash.
Yeah,
I think that just indicates whether or not there is a flash. I don't think it's
a sub-feature. The application uses the device camera's flash. Have you set Android hardware camera flash as a use feature? And you have also set it's required?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's just whether or not there actually is a flash, not if you can actually take it off of auto mode.
Okay. I mean, it does say the application uses, which seems like...
It sounds like that's something we should perhaps
Yeah,
take to the
so
CTS
maybe market should be a bit more specific, we should add a more specific feature there, so that you can at least filter the device out. So if hardware manufacturers say, we don't want to enable manual flash control, your app just doesn't show up on those devices.
Or submit a CTS test yourself.
Yes. So yeah, we'll follow up a little bit more. Make sure that it sounds like it. Like I said, from what we're seeing here, just on a quick read of the CTS, it sounds like it's an optional feature. I'm going to check with them and make sure that that actually is the case. And if so, we can go and look and do making sure that it's appropriately exposed to developers, so you can detect whether or not manual flash control is supported, and 2, adding a flag to the manifest that you can on those devices. So we'll expose those feature requests to the relevant teams for you.
In the meantime, unfortunately, it would appear that your option is basically special casing the crap out of it.
And using the supported devices list.
And using the supported devices list, yeah.
To blacklist some devices.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I'm going to post the rest of the weird errors that I'm getting somewhere in Google+, so if you want to look at it, you'll have fun, I promise.
Thank you.
Actually, a better place to put them would be on Stack Overflow, and we can approach it there and try and find out like a proper answer and put it in one place so other people seeing the same errors can at least get some guidance.
Yeah, because they're not actually, it's not something you can really do anything about it. Just the errors, some integer not getting passed, not getting parsed, and low level and stuff like that.
Gotcha.
So it's a shitload of magic.
There's a question on the Google Plus stream as well.
Okay.
Wait, is there an actual question over there?
There is. Oh, sorry, if you can't read that, it says, we talked about the loader classes, which we didn't, but we have in the past. He wants to know, is it possible to report progress while the loader is loading? So, like being able to update a download progress bar or something like that.
So, from what I remember, loaders have a life cycle attached to them. And so there is a state between loading and loaded where you can go and display status. I can't remember if it actually lets you report on the % completed. Do you want to check on that, Alex? That being said, I'm not sure loaders are entirely the right solution if you actually have so much data that you need to display a progress bar. Loaders are normally used to go and say you have a database on disk and you have a cursor that's going in and reading through it, right? Every time you go and pull new items from that database, if you try and do that as part of your UI thread, you're going to cause your application to stall for a moment. Loaders abstract a lot of the work that you had to be done manually before to go and move that up to a separate thread, and make it so you can say, okay, just load this data, and the loader takes care of your threads for you. But in all these cases, your wait time is milliseconds, hundreds of milliseconds, a second at the worst. If you're looking at load times much larger than that, it's probably time to start doing something different, like using Download Manager and displaying something in the notification bar, or maybe a custom download indicator in part of your app that you go and fetch the data from your server. Given that in those cases it might actually take more than a few seconds, right? If your download is going to take a few minutes, you don't want to have the user trapped within your app. If the user exits your app, that loader is going to has the potential to disappear too, right? And presumably, if you have that much data, you want the download to keep going, right?
Yeah.
Does it say anything in there about reporting progress?
No, there's just a couple callbacks for loader created, loader reset, loader finished.
So.
But there's no, loader 50% done or anything like that.
Yeah.
I think the thing about loaders is, as you say, it's assuming that you've already got it in a content provider, and that content provider isn't actually downloading stuff in the background.
Right.
Yeah, basically, that would be where you would do your updating, is if there is something downloading in the background. But if I can take a step further back and just say progress downloading dialogues and things, try and avoid them.
Yeah.
The user doesn't need to know whether it's 50% complete. There are obviously some exceptions to that if you're downloading large amounts of data, but there are probably other places you want to put that, and a loader is sort of too far up the stack. So you want to be keeping track of how much you've downloaded in the service which is doing the downloading. And then you can update a notification or whatever it is that you want to use, but try not to provide that data if it's not providing something really useful to the user.
Yeah, and to give an example from some of our own apps, so take Gmail for example. I have a lot of email. I have a lot of email, and when I first sync my phone, it can take probably a good 5-10 minutes for it all to download, just because there's that much data. So in that case, we just go and say, we display a message saying, please wait for the initial sync to complete. After that, once we have at least the first set of data to display, we never display a loading indicator again, or at least one that forces the user to wait for the download. What we do display is a little syncing icon up in the corner of the screen to show you that there's some new data incoming, but we don't actually need to let the user know how much data we've downloaded. In those cases, it's understood it's going to complete within a few seconds, maybe 20 seconds at the most. But the user can still continue working with all the data they have cached on the phone. And that's the usual pattern. Contacts does that, Gmail does that. Anything where you're just syncing data into a content provider, that's usually the approach you want to take. And then there is sync adapter to go and help with all that as well. So.
One more thing is that you could perhaps take a look at the async task loader, because a lot of the stuff we've been talking about is talking very much about the content, the cursor loader, sorry,
right.
When you're working with a database. If you're not working with a database, like loaders are supposed to be a framework for loading anything, not just from a content provider.
Right.
So if you take a look at the async task loader, which basically runs an async task to do the loading, so if you can hook into the, on updates, there's a hook in an async task for you to update your UI when you're on the right kind of thread. So if you can hook into that, you would be able to do a UI update.
Yeah.
So take a look at the async task loader and see what's going on there, I think.
Yeah. Also, one follow-up to that too is I just in general be very careful about loading things as part of your activity because there's not a guarantee that your user is actually going to have internet connectivity when they're running your app. So at all possible, we usually recommend going in. Aside from perhaps the initial load, usually it's a better idea to go and fetch data sources as part of a service, and then just make sure they're cached on disk for when the user actually wants to access them.
That's actually a really good point, because the other thing which you need to keep in mind is that if the user rotates their screen, your activity is going to get destroyed along with anything in it.
Yep.
So if you've got anything which is long running at all, you do not want it in an activity. You want it in a service. You want it in you could even use a UI-less fragment, but something which is going to continue if someone moves in or out of their activity or if it gets destroyed.
Okay, so moving on to the next question, let's take another live one from whoever that random black box is there at the bottom of the screen.
The black box on our screen, anyway.
Ah, now they're not black.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I muted video.
Hey, Kieran. You're muted.
It's me still.
Hey, so did you have another question, or are you just watching?
No, I'm just watching.
Okay.
Okay, cool.
In that case, let's move on to another one on Moderator. So is it possible for Webview to inherit text colors from the current theme to make it look better under a transparent background?
No.
I don't believe so.
No.
Yeah, I don't think that there's a good way to do that. More importantly, it sounds a little odd to me, to be honest. Normally when you have a web view, you're displaying whatever the web content is as the author intended it. Sometimes you might be able to do something with user styles, which I'm also not sure if WebView actually supports.
Maybe. I would say maybe like if you absolutely had to query the system and try to inject some CSS into the WebView. based on the RGB values you pick up from the theme, but it doesn't strike me something that you want to do in the first place.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. It sounds a little suspicious, and I want to know a little bit more detail about what you're trying to pull off there.
Right.
But yeah, alternatively too. Actually, no, I just can't. Nothing's coming to mind. Actually, yeah, I'm curious what you're trying to do there, but I mean, I guess you're trying to get your Webview to actually just look like a native app. I guess.
Twice actually.
Possibly,
And,
yeah.
yeah. I will add that on newer devices, if you use the Holo theme, you're guaranteed that the Holo theme exists on all newer devices and looks the same on all of those devices. So in that case, you'd just be able to go and guarantee that your app has a certain look and feel, regardless of which device it's running on. So that might be an option too. But yeah, other than that, I can't think of a good way to do this.
Yeah, I mean, I would say either rely on Holo or just don't do it. Okay.
Gareth asked a question in the stream. I've asked him to join the Hangout, which he kindly has. So would you like to repeat your question so we can all hear it and answer?
Sure. First of all, I'll apologize for the accent. Okay, so I would like to support fragments in a current application. The problem being that I have to support both pre-Honeycomb clients and post-Honeycomb. So obviously I can use the support package to support the pre-Honeycomb clients. The question is, what's the easiest way to support both in the same code base?
So the answer is still the support package, actually. So there's no reason why you can't use the support package on newer devices. And I believe it actually, I don't know if it actually falls back on the native code if it's there. But in any case, yeah, no, yeah, but I don't think there's any harm in using the support package on newer phones. The only thing you'll just want to watch out for is the action bar. The support package doesn't have any code to actually go and render your action bar for you. Of course, the action bar is just an options menu. So if you don't do anything, whatever you put in the action bar on newer phones will just appear in an options menu on older phones. If you really want to go and have a consistent feel across devices, there are a number of libraries out there that will go and draw that action bar for you. You'd want to make sure to go and disable that code when you're on newer devices, because you really do want to use the system action bar when it's available. But as far as fragment support, there's really no harm in using that same code across older devices and newer devices.
Yeah. Okay. With regard to the third-party action bar libraries Trevor was talking about, two that we've heard really positive things about are GreenDroid and I want to say Action Bar Sherlock.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what it's called. Yeah. I would recommend starting there.
Start with Sherlock.
Start with Sherlock. Makes sense.
And stay there.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
And stay there, apparently. All right, so Action Bar Sherlock is going that is unanimously voted for here.
Thank you.
Yep, totally. All right. Let's see. Do you want to take another live question? So we've got a bunch of people on the stream now.
I'd like to ask a question.
Sure. Sure.
All right. So I was looking through the Android design site, and it has this cool section on the new up button, which is if you have these two levels of hierarchy, you can always push the up button and put back to the home page of the app. Which is, I like that idea a lot. It's really useful. It helps a lot of the issues that I've heard of people complaining about the back button not making sense. The only problem we have is our app actually has 3 levels of hierarchy, and we're confused that pushing the up button sometimes still doesn't make sense, and we're wondering if you could help talk us through some of the problems.
Yeah, sure. Do you want to give us a bit more detail about how your app's designed and what these different hierarchies are?
Yeah. So we have a list of conversations essentially. It's a social networking app, and so from the home screen you have a list of all the conversations you're part of. Then inside of each conversation you have a bunch of messages, but you can actually drill into each message and comment on them. And so the biggest issue we're having is say you come in from a notification and you're in this detailed message screen and you push the up button, then you go back to this intermediate the conversation itself. The problem at that point is say you push the back button, you're actually brought back to the home screen. Or from that middle screen, you would almost expect the back button to make you go back to your home of the app. Or are we thinking about that wrong, or is there
Wait, so you're saying... Yeah, I'm trying to understand this without pictures here, but so you're saying so you go from the main view to a conversationalist view to a detail view, and then when you hit the back button, or was it the back button or the up button?
You're being injected to the detail view from a notification.
Okay, so you're going
all the way to the bottom, the leaf node, and he's asking how to navigate back out of it.
So I think the thing of it is, you said earlier that the button always takes you home. That's not true. So that button in the action bar has two modes. If it can either be a home button, so it's kind of like a web page masthead, which takes you, like you said, back to the home activity, or you can overload that metaphor and show the up caret. So that's an API called show home as up. You set that, then you get the little up arrow, right? So when you're using that, that actually takes you up one logical step in your navigation hierarchy. So yeah, if you had a notification taking you straight through to the detail view, you'd want to set the little caret on that, the up arrow, and then pressing that would take you to the second level hierarchy, at which point you can press it again to go back to the root.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does, yeah.
Yeah, so just to be completely clear, yes, if you follow that notification, hitting the up arrow will take you to the middle level hierarchy, whereas hitting the back key will take you back to wherever you came from temporarily, rather than navigation.
Right.
But within your example where you got to the detail from a notification, I think the back button would just take you. The intuitive thing would be for the back button to just leave the application.
So in our new guidance, when you enter your app into like a deep link into your app from either a notification or a widget, you're basically supposed to synthesize the back stack so that pressing back takes you up the hierarchy as well. It's kind of an potentially unintuitive thing, but through our research, we've actually found that users really, I guess, are more inclined to understand that than to get thrown out of the app.
I mean, yeah, I found that is exactly what the Gmail application does. As you go into a message, the back button now it takes you back to conversation view.
Right.
Okay.
You recommend doing that in this kind of three-pane layout as well?
Yep.
Yeah.
And we actually, if you go to the Android design, site that we posted a couple weeks ago, underneath patterns and navigation, the very last section on there, it's system to app navigation, and it covers exactly this use case. With using Gmail as an example, but yeah, I think your app should probably follow the same pattern. So yeah. In which case, pretty much, once you come in from the system, both the backup button and the up button basically do the same thing, which is walking you up the hierarchy of your app as if the user had navigated in there naturally. So, like Roman said, you're synthesizing the back stack.
Okay.
Cool.
Okay.
All right, let's go ahead and move to another moderator question at this point. How do you put a scrollable view inside of a view pager when you both need to scroll inside or scroll in the same direction? For example, mail is horizontally and vertically scrollable in Gmail, and you can also swipe horizontally to the next message.
There's sorry, I don't know if it's that.
Yeah, we have Roman Nurk down there in the corner that you guys can't see, but
the disembodied voice of UX wisdom.
In one of the most recent updates to View Pager, there's a new method called CanScroll. Actually, I forgot if it's on the pager itself or if it's on the adapter, but basically you override that and you determine at any point if the View Pager should horizontally scroll or if it should allow its child to horizontally scroll. So I don't know if we have an example on that, but it's called CanScroll, so look into that.
So yeah, there's just no magic with View Pages, right? You have to understand your view hierarchy and decide when you want to scroll. So if you've got a pinching zoom image inside your view pager, then maybe whilst the image has still got borders off the screen and you're dragging it, the view pager doesn't scroll, and you tell the view pager not to scroll, but then as the right side of the image is on the screen, you want the whole view pager to scroll as well and go to the next image, like we do in the gallery. And it's at that point you just hit can scroll to true, and the view pager takes over.
No, but you will have to implement yourself. It's not just, view pager magically scrollable in those directions or something.
Also, another thing to watch out for is if you have like something that's infinitely scrollable, like a map, then you may want to avoid using a view pager altogether because that's just going to be a really complicated interaction. And Even if you have something that's not infinitely scrollable, but very, very scrollable, like if the default view of your center page is like a 3,000 pixel wide bitmap that you must scroll through to get to the last page, that's going to be a really awkward interaction.
Okay, cool. So let's move on to one more moderator question here. I extended async task to process all my HTTP requests. Other than not being able to download in the background, what could be the other negatives of this implementation? And in parentheses, it says, yes, I could use loaders. That's a good question, actually. I think the first one that, like you said, you won't be able to download in the background if the user exits your app. Your async tasks are gonna terminate. The other one that comes to mind, just off the top of my head, is it's generally a bad idea to call an async task within an async task, or to invoke a new async task from within an async task. So that sort of limits your options for parallelism. So if you want to go and load several resources simultaneously, there won't be a really good way to do that unless you start managing threads within your async task, which sort of defeats the point.
I think the other problem is async tasks are designed to only run once, and you have to create a new async task for a new task. So if you have, it's sort of hard to pick out the context from what we have in the question, but if you have a situation where you're sort of consistently in the background, like a browser or something, like constantly loading images and text and whatever via HTTP requests and responses, then you would basically have to just keep generating async tasks. In that context, it'd be better to just create a separate thread.
Yeah. Now, that being said, if all you're doing is, say, making a request to a web service, just posting a blob of JSON or fetching an XML document, and that's really all you're doing, and it's just one request, there's actually not too much that's really wrong with that.
You're also vulnerable to rotations as well.
Yes. So again, same thing. Yeah. If your app dies, the async task is named. Right.
Yeah, it's probably worth keeping in mind, like, the async task class is tempting to use for anything you want to do in the background because it's just simpler than implementing threads and runables and stuff if you're not particularly familiar with that sort of thing. The reality is it's really only something you need to be using if you need to synchronize with the UI thread to post an update to the UI. If that's not what you're doing, so if you don't have a UI interaction in either on progress or on complete, then async task is probably not the class you're looking for, generally speaking.
Okay. So there's your answer. Yeah, and actually, it's the same thing about loaders. Is loaders may or may not actually be the correct approach depending on what you're doing. If you're actually fetching a lot of data, actually, then we run into the problem we ran into earlier, where you don't get a lot of you don't get status updates with loaders. And again, if your app terminates, you're going to lose whatever progress you've made on that. So loaders actually have a lot of the same negatives here. Granted, they do give you a little bit more flexibility, but still a lot of things to watch out there for too. It really does depend on a case-by-case basis what you're trying to do and what the nature of the data you're loading is. And this is assuming you're even loading, right? If you're just going and trying to post something, that's another issue too. So, next question then. Let's go ahead and take another live one since we've got a couple people, or at least, looks like 2 new people on the stream. Rita, do you want to pick one at random?
Let's see. Sergio, I think. We're losing the bottom half of the names. Do you have a question for us? I'll put you on the big screen so you know who we're talking to. No? Alright, I'll put you on the spot. If anyone on the live stream does have a question, just jump up and start talking now, otherwise we'll move back to the moderator.
Can I have another quick one?
Yeah, go on.
Sure.
There's no...
Is there a way to detect custom ROMs?
That's a tough
Next
one.
question.
Oh, come on.
The short version, well, so it depends on what you mean by detect custom ROMs. If you just want to detect that the user has changed the ROM, that's actually pretty difficult because it might actually just be a stock ROM or something very similar to it that they've loaded over it. And most of the time, there's actually not too much reason to actually do that. But if you want to know if a user has root, that's a different issue. Because a lot of times, say for content management, you don't want to go and let users have direct access to certain parts of the file system, which you get with root. That's probably the most common use case I see. Again, no foolproof way to do it, but the easiest way is just check for a user-accessible SU command. If you see that, might be an indication that the user has, has modified their function, they have root access. But that being said, it's not easy. If you do that, then somebody could go and do something, rename it, or possibly, if they have something on there that prevents apps from directly getting root, that could be an issue.
The thing about custom ROMs is that they're custom, so they can do anything.
Right.
Anything you want to use to decide whether it is or not, they can spoof that, and there's very little you can do about it. So, yeah, it's I understand why you want to do it, but the unfortunate short answer is, yeah, there's no bit that can be flipped. Otherwise, they would just flip it back on the custom ROM, and you're back to where you started.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. All right. So let's go back to moderator here. Fragments seem to break a few things. Like in a layout, the on-click attribute for a handler method will try and fire off on the activity, not the fragment object that inflated it. Also, resuming an activity does not autofill fields in a fragment. Fix. So, yeah, this is intended behavior for the most part. So on-click does go to your activity. That's because your activity might actually want to go and handle that click in a way separate from the way the fragment might be wired up to do it, depending on what's on screen at the time. So the easiest fix, if you really just want to go and maintain your existing behavior, is to just go and add some code to your activity that goes and routes those click events back into the fragment. As far as auto-filling form fields, actually that's a new one to me, but fragments do have for the most part, most of the lifecycle calls that an activity does. And so I believe you could just go and put all your data into a bundle on save instance state, I believe is what it's called.
Yeah, on save instance state.
Yeah, and then on resume you can go and extract that back out. I'm actually a little bit surprised to hear that one, because my understanding was usually that form fields are usually automatically restored as long as they're being properly inflated and the system knows they exist. So, I mean, has anybody else heard something similar? Like, I'm almost wondering if, I'm just curious whether or not this is actually intended behavior fragments, or if there's something else going on here.
Yeah, resuming an activity, I would expect to autofill fields in the fragment, presuming that it's the same fragment. So if you're just using the normal fragment transaction to add a fragment, and then you rotate the screen, it should re-add the fragment and fill in all of the edit text values. So
right.
That's how I would expect it to behave.
Like you said, though, assuming that we're reusing the same fragment and not just creating a different fragment and throwing it in there.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, take a look at how your fragments are getting created and how your layout is being inflated. It sounds like there might be something a little odd there that's causing your form fields not to get filled in again. But yeah, as far as on-click, that is intended behavior, and the fix for it is just to go and add a little bit of code to your activity to go and route those click events back into the fragment. All right, next question. Is there a way for the view pager to move pages in a circular way?
I presume they mean here if you get to the end to go back to the beginning.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I was wondering about that actually. I haven't found any, and are there any plans of supporting this? Well, as far as plans go, yeah, we can't talk about future plans, so not confirming or denying anything, just blanket, we can't talk about future plans.
Right.
As far as what we can do right now,
yeah, so this is kind of like an infinitely wrapping view pager. The only real workaround that I know of is basically to create an adapter that declares an infinite size or like a near infinite size, like system.maxint or whatever it is in Java, and then just kind of create an adapter that's smart enough to return views or return fragments, for the right position. So if it's like 4 items, then make sure that position 0 and position 4 returns the exact same thing. So I mean, it's not a great solution, but it's the only real workaround that I've heard of so far.
Okay. So, all right, let's move on to another moderator question here. Michael asks, how to close the notifications dropdown in Android 3.0 or above? from a custom rich notification that includes an additional button. More details on Stack Overflow, which I need to pull up to actually see what those details are.
While he does that, I don't think that there is a way to close the notification drop down in Android 3 and above.
Yeah,
I'm a little surprised to hear that there is conceivably a way to do it prior to Android 3 and above.
Yeah.
Before you click on
That's my understanding as well too. Like you can definitely, you could add a button that goes in if you have, say, you have a service and you want to go and have your service terminate. I believe the music app does that. They draw a little close button and you click that and it, it's basically the same as saying pause, right? Is it music that does that?
Well, so what you can do, so what you can do to get rid of your notification when you hit a particular button is to dismiss the notification.
Right.
So that would be the right way to do that. And in terms of closing the whole sort of...
Yeah, if you want to close the whole drawer, I don't think there's actually supposed to be a way to do that.
No. In fact, kind of doing it the way we're describing isn't really the right user experience model you want to be following. Like a button on a rich notification should do something to an ongoing service, so pause music or skip to the next track or something like that.
Right.
You shouldn't be using it as a replacement for the dismiss X, which is already on the notification.
Right. Does that sound about right from what you're reading on Stack Overflow there, Alex?
Yeah. Let's see. It says, what I would like to achieve is to keep all the current behavior as described, but also close the notification dropdown from the intent the button launches as possible.
Okay. I would probably advise not doing that as well, because it's not how the system works by default. So
right. Yeah,
you don't really want to surprise your users with your custom behavior.
Right. No other app on the system does that, and usually that's a sign that your app shouldn't either. So.
Alternatively, it would be enough if the activity from the button intent gains the window focus. But yeah, I think the same answer applies.
Yeah, I mean you can effectively do that by starting a new activity from the button press, but please don't do that. Clicking the notification itself can and should open an activity in some circumstances, in fact a lot. That's the expected behavior, but the buttons within it shouldn't do anything visible to the UI. Okay,
so moving on, Ed asks, if you have to store a password persistently in Android 4, what's the safest way? That's actually a very good question, and I think the answer is actually, it's a little tricky actually. First off, what are you guarding against, right? Are you guarding against other apps on the system trying to access the password, or are you trying to prevent a user from ever accessing that password again, for security reasons? If you just want to prevent other apps on the system from accessing it, you could just go and write it, somewhere to internal storage. Make sure that you have it set to read-only, and ideally within the application's storage area on disk. And those two combined should pretty much guarantee that nothing else can read from it.
And just try not to write plain text.
Yeah. Even if you write it to if you write it to the SD card, then things get a bit more tricky because the SD card is wide open. You can set it to read-only so that. Actually, can you set it to read-only for your app on SD card? I think you can, actually. No. So read-only for your app is actually only supported for internal memory. Yeah. So, first thing, don't put it on the SD card. There's a flag that when you create things saying that you only want your app to access it. Those two should prevent other things from accessing it, provided that they're not the user. Now, if it's the user who's trying to read the password, then things get a bit more tricky because they could go and they might have root on the phone, things like that. I don't think there's actually really a good way to do that. For the most part, Android, when it comes to password storage, we don't protect against the user trying to recover their own password back off the device. Right. That being said, what I see a lot of apps do is exchange the password for an auth token. So the auth token does still have similar rights to a password, but if it does get extracted off the phone, it doesn't have as much value, right? If the user is using the same password for all other services, you can't use it elsewhere. You can also go and issue a different auth token to each device, so that way the user can revoke authorization for that one specific phone without having to change their password. So I know a lot of apps that do that, and that's sort of the best practice right now. And I think that, is there anything else that we're missing here?
pretty comprehensive.
Not that I can think of.
That's about all.
Yeah. So yeah, and if you have any more questions, definitely drop on the live stream right now, because authorization and authentication is always a very complicated topic, and security is always a very complicated topic. So if you have any other concerns, definitely feel free to ask live. But I think that that's generally the best practices for handling passwords right now. And you also might want to look into using Account Manager too. Account Manager is not going to get you very much extra in the way of security. It's still going to go. The password will be saved in such a way that only Account Manager can access it. But again, if a user has root on their phone or an attacker has root, it's conceivably possible to extract the tokens back out of that. For the it at least takes care of a lot of that work for you. So that's one thing to consider with Account Manager. Right.
Try the live stream. Does anyone
Yeah, is there anybody else on live stream that has any questions? I noticed there's a couple black boxes down there, so your video is muted. I have no idea who you are. But if anybody has any questions, feel free to speak up now. I take the silence as no questions.
we're almost out of time.
Yeah, so we have about 4 minutes left here. So if anybody does have any questions, feel free to just speak up. Otherwise, I guess we'll just go and answer another 1 or 2 questions on Moderator before we run out of time.
I was going to say perhaps with a couple of minutes left might be a good thing to talk about the alternative for how we'll be doing it in the future without Moderator. Right. Because I think...
yes, that's right. Yeah, and actually, you know more than I do. But yeah.
Yeah. So far we've been taking questions on a combination of things on comment stream and some on Moderator and some on live questions, which makes it a bit tricky for us to get all the context we need. So what we're thinking of doing moving forward is to take questions via Stack Overflow. So what we'll be asking people to do is post your questions in there whenever you like, as far ahead of time or immediately during as you choose. And we will open up Stack Overflow and check those out. So to make sure that we get to those questions, obviously, post them into the comment stream so that we can go through them one at a time, like we did with Moderator. And certainly jump on the live stream. I think you guys can all see that the most interesting discussions and the easiest way for us to be able to really answer your questions is if we can talk to you in person. So that's the easiest way. If you're wondering how do you get onto the live stream, you need to be in my extended circles. Anyone who posts a question or a link to Stack Overflow in the comment stream announcing any of the Hangouts, I will add to my circle so you can join in live that way. So into the future, I think that's probably how we're going to do it. If anyone has a better idea, please ping me and we will think about it. We want to try and make this as interactive and useful as we can for everyone, so we're still learning. This is all new to us. Speaking of which as well, if you've made it all the way through to the end here and you find this stuff useful, please do +1 the posts so that we have an idea of how many people are out there. We don't have analytics yet, so we're flying blind, so the more information we can get about how many people are watching and whether you find it useful and how you'd like us to do things in the future is gratefully received.
Okay, and with that, we're down to the last couple minutes, so if anybody does have any questions, last chance before I guess we should sign off.
Rita, speaking of pinging, I just pinged you on email. Wanted to get your thoughts. If you have anybody who you can recommend or forward to, if you can't help me out, feel free to contact me.
Okay, who did you ping on email?
Rito.
Okay.
All right. The disembodied voice to our right will check out your email and let you know.
Sure. Thanks.
Okay. Awesome. And yeah, we're out of time now, so thank you everyone for joining. And we'll be back here same time next week, so that's Wednesday, 2 p.m. Pacific. And in the meantime, be sure to monitor Radio Stream, and he'll post links to Moderator or I guess Stack Overflow for questions next week, so that you guys can post ahead of time like usual. All right, thanks everyone.
Thanks everyone.